The Honorable Tara Rivers has been a big proponent of education for her entire life. Minister Rivers holds a Bachelor of Arts degree in psychology from Brandeis and an MBA from the Schulich School of Business at York University. She's also a qualified attorney. She is immediate past chair of the United World Colleges Cayman Islands National Foundation and was one of the youngest recipients of the United World College Scholarship at age 15. In addition, Honorable Tara Rivers is an advocate for youth development and was a driving force behind the development of the first comprehensive national youth policy for the Cayman Islands. This blueprint for youth development initiated projects such as the radio program Youth Flex, the National and District Youth Forums, the National Youth Commission, and other youth development programs. Minister Rivers has achieved a number of firsts in her life. In May, she became the first female cabinet minister appointed for the District of West Bay and the first female minister responsible for education. Honorable Minister Rivers will speak to us today on teaching values and ethics to the millennials, and I ask you to welcome her in true fashion. Minister Rivers.
Oh, but then now I have to. How do we go start it? Okay. Just working out the technology in this age of Generation Z. You can tell I'm not of that generation. Let's see.
Page down, next slide.
Page up, back. Perfect. Okay. Good afternoon, everyone. I am pleased to have been asked to be here at the UCCI's 2014 International Conference and to speak on the topic of teaching values to the present generation. Today, I'll primarily be speaking about the Cayman Islands education system and how our system promotes the teaching of values and morals. But first, I think it's worth taking some time to consider who the present generation represents and how this generation represents and presents new and unique challenges to our education system. The present generation, as is sometimes known as Generation Z, they're truly the 21st century generation, with the whole of their formative years lived in this century. While they're today's children and teenagers, by the end of the decade, it has been estimated that they will comprise a significant 12% of the global workforce and, with reference to the focus of this conference, be exposed to and subjected to the effects of corruption. In fact, some may argue that they may already be exposed to corruption and corrupt practices in some form or the other as it relates to their educational experience. Within the Cayman Islands, our present generation, compared to previous ones, are spending more time in education and are increasingly seeking opportunities to further their education and training. In a world where young people consistently rely on technology, and the role of our teacher is now moving to becoming that of a source of content, from a source of content to a facilitator of learning, driving participation and interaction rather than instruction and control. In considering this, I would like to highlight 4 ways in which our education system is changing to meet the emerging learning styles of Generation Z. The teaching of values and morals should necessarily be facilitated in such a way as well. So what are we learning? The Ministry of Education expects that all schools within the Cayman Islands will embrace the 3 R's of the future: relevance, rigor, and relationships. For when students find their studies relevant, teachers can address and increase the rigor to meet the needs of their students. However, what is relevant to one student may not be relevant to another, which is why the 3rd R, which is relationships, is so important. Our educators need to know that their students, what their students are, who their students are, and what their interests are, and, more importantly for many, why they're struggling. With this in mind, teaching methods will need to be adapted and interactive, and as our teachers strive to engage and to maintain this engagement of all students. It is worth highlighting that in this age and stage of technological development and advancement, and with an estimated 90% of the world's data having been created in just the last 2 years alone, educators are having to constantly reevaluate their methods and lesson planning. With this in mind, the focus of our education system is shifting from content to process, from information itself to the means of gathering, analyzing, and applying the information. So, when is learning taking place? Anytime, anywhere. Online learning and flexible delivery make student-centered learning critical. Schools are responding to the new timetables of families and the complexity of redefined households and roles by moving from a traditional 8 a.m. to 3 p.m. school day to new alternatives. The Ministry of Education is investing heavily to provide extended after-school activities and programs for all students and will continue to support initiatives that result in a more flexible approach to learning and teaching. So where is this learning taking place? Classroom spaces and in flexible spaces and places. Traditional classrooms were constructed to keep distractions out, to keep students in, and to keep them facing the teacher. Our 21st century classrooms, however, within the Cayman Islands are being reconfigured and rewired to embrace new technologies, and in doing so, create a learning environment where both the teachers and students have the latest tools at hand. We have embraced the technological age within the Cayman Islands. We recognize that our classrooms are moving away from the traditional concepts of desk and rows, where the emphasis was on teaching lessons, to classrooms that now incorporate the latest technologies and are a key part in supporting the educational journey of our students. How is learning taking place? Traditionally, learning has taken place in the classroom, and in the practice and application has taken place through homework. However, in the 21st century, the content can be accessed through technology anywhere, at any time virtually. And the content can be accessed through visual and other engaging forms. This puts a greater emphasis on discussion and application of the content, which, with the present generation, is absolutely critical. Our teachers are therefore now required to be expert facilitators, for they will be supporting a system where increasingly the learning extends outside of the classroom, but the essential engagement and practice is still conducted at school. In terms of values, it's been suggested that in global terms, the present generation embraces the traditional beliefs and values of the family unit. They are smarter at a younger age, flexible and more responsible. They have liberal social values, are tolerant of diverse cultures, and are environmentally conscious and value authenticity. Having been raised in a technological age, this generation is also highly vulnerable and susceptible to influences and pressures relating to media, sources and content of media, and the misuse of technology. It is during this generation we have seen the rise of such technology-driven phenomena as cyberbullying, and perhaps more than any other generation, our present students are constantly being required to make judgments and choices related to their own value systems. We must also remember that they're also being bombarded on a daily basis by information and messages that are in direct conflict with the accepted values of society, and as a result, will at times question and seek answers related to their own values and beliefs and those of the wider community in which they live. Having looked at our present generation of students and their place within this ever-changing, technology-driven education system, it's now worth considering the place of values education in both a global and local terms. So what is values education in the global context? Hill defines values as the priorities individuals and society attach to certain beliefs, experiences, and objects in deciding how they will live and what they will treasure. It's generally agreed that values education refers to all aspects of the process by which teachers and other school staff transmit such values to students through formal and informal instruction. Values education in schools includes education, ethical education, and is linked to the development of other aspects like character, moral values, religious and spiritual values, personal values, social values, and cultural values. The teaching of values exemplifies social and emotional learning, moral reasoning, life skills education, health, violence prevention, critical thinking, ethical reasoning, conflict resolution, and mediation. Values are obtained through different modes, which, again, in this age of technology, the modes are multifaceted, polarized, and often unrestricted. All issues that will undoubtedly need further consideration from the international community. However, it is generally thought that the most important platform for influencing an individual's personal value system is their family, the school, and the environment in which the child grows up. The teaching and learning of values can therefore be seen to begin at home, and it is then further developed during the formative years of schooling. In supporting the development of such values, a teacher's professional duty can be seen as extending beyond formal teaching, since they play a critical role in imparting values and shaping the life of the students within their care. This stance is supported by Neil Hawkes, who presented a keynote speech at the Australian Values Education Forum in 2006, where he stated that teachers send messages into the future. They are the role models who have the ongoing conversation of significance between one generation and the next. Hawkes, in line with the Cayman Islands Ministry of Education, also emphasized the place of the character, identity, ideas, and purpose of each student, arguing that such change of emphasis would see schools turn out individuals who are developed as well-rounded citizens and lifelong learners. So what is values education in the local context? In the past, the absence of formal means of education, or in absence of formal means of education, values within the Cayman Islands were transmitted mainly through religious teaching, stories, folklore, culture, and traditional practices. When the earlier religious pioneers introduced formal schooling in the Cayman Islands in the 1800s, their religious values became the foundation of their educational teaching, a trend that continued through to the introduction of the first government-funded schools in the 1920s. Today, the importance of religion and biblical principles, in particular, in setting our most dominant values is reflected in the Constitution Order of 2009, which affirms the intention of the Cayman Islands to be a God-fearing country based on traditional Christian values, tolerant of other religions and beliefs, a country in which religion finds its expression in moral living and social justice, a caring community based on mutual respect for all individuals and their basic human rights, a country committed to the democratic values of human dignity, equality, and freedom, a community that practices honest and open dialogue to ensure mutual understanding and social harmony. The Constitution of the Cayman Islands also includes the Bill of Rights, which is termed the cornerstone of democracy in the Cayman Islands, and recognizes the Christian values and socio-economic framework for the Cayman Islands. So instilling a sense of morals and values is a goal that is highlighted throughout our policies and procedures in the Cayman Islands government education system, and is reflected both in the national curriculum and the strategic plan for education. Our strategic plan for education encompasses this in its vision, mission, values, and its strategic goals. The vision of the plan states, our students will be confident, motivated learners and responsible, productive citizens who are capable of succeeding in a globally competitive world. The requirement for them of being responsible citizens relates to our students having values which make them honest and trustworthy, so they will be positive influences and contributors to our society. This vision is then further reinforced by the plan's mission, which states to develop safe and caring centers of excellence for academic, personal, moral, social, cultural, and spiritual development of our children and young people under our care, where they're prepared for life, learning, and work, and where parents and the community are welcomed and valued partners. The mission speaks more directly to the education system's role in ensuring that the teaching and learning environment of our students allows them to develop the morals they need to succeed in life. The plan seeks to encourage all students to have their own set of morals and values. The plan states, we will help our children develop the character and personal attributes needed to prepare them to be responsible and productive citizens and lifelong learners ready for further education and the world of work. Through the strategic plan, the Ministry of Education, the Department of Education Services, and our schools recognize that we have a responsibility in teaching our students about what it is to be a person of high ethical values, and to ensure our students are taught or given the tools to be honest, positive, and productive citizens. The strategic goal 4 of the plan states to build safer school communities and to promote inclusion specifically related to developing welcoming, supportive, respectful, and inclusive learning environments that value individual safety, well-being, and the right to learn. This again speaks to the requirement of the school system to promote safe environments where students know the difference between right and wrong and are able to make good moral judgments on the challenges they may encounter. Goal 4 requires that policies be developed to support respectful schools, ensuring that staff promote positive values and expectations that the positive and caring and respectful relationships are built within the school and the community. It also requires that students are educated on topics such as the misuse of drugs, gang-related activities, bullying, harassment, sexual misconduct, personal health and safety, all which relate directly to the teaching and development of ethical thinking. In support of this stance, the Ministry of Education has directed that our education system have national policies in place to help define the values taught in our schools. Some of these policies which we have developed directly relates to values education. These include school discipline and student behavior, misuse of drugs, religious instruction and devotions, sex and relationship education, and special education needs. These national policies seek to ensure that school-based policies are aligned to a set of values which promote certain preferred outcomes. For example, the school discipline and student behavior policy states that the school-based policy for discipline and behavior must include statements relating to the principles of the school and the respective rights and responsibilities of the school, students, and parents in ensuring an orderly climate for learning. The development of this policy was a collaborative process, which included focus groups. And as I'd like to say at this point, this policy is a work in progress, and we will continue in this particular year and in this administration to look at strengthening this policy, as we know that many of our schools are challenged with some issues of behavior, and I'm sure this is not just the case in the Cayman Islands, but in the region as a whole. All individual school policies on discipline and behavior enshrine a common set of principles. We expect the highest standards of behavior and conduct, support and encouragement from all of our members of our school community as we base our teaching and our school ethos on these common values. Adults and students should show respect for one another. All members of the school community are considerate towards the learning needs of each individual and supportive of the school as a learning community. Good behavior is to be rewarded and sanctions to be applied consistently for inappropriate behavior. All members of the school community are entitled to work and learn in a safe and secure environment. All school adults will model positive behavior and promote it through active development of students' social, emotional, and behavioral skills. All of the other policies which I mentioned previously are written in a similar fashion, and they all confirm the Ministry of Education's commitment to values education. I would also like to note that the national policies developed by the Ministry of Education are all cross-referenced with the Cayman Islands Constitution because, as previously mentioned, ultimately the Constitution creates a moral imperative to instill the set of values that we as a country aim to adhere to. It is therefore important that we must instill these values from a young age in order to promote the development of a value-centered and moral community. Another level at which values education is promoted in our education system is through the national curriculum. The majority of values education themes are taught within the curricula of personal, social, and moral learning and religious education, though aspects of values education permeate throughout other subjects as well. The national curriculum for personal, social, and moral learning includes the need for individuals to be empathetic and be able to deal effectively with their own emotions and inner moods. It also requires them to be aware of the social conventions and responsibilities that underpin effective relationships. Conflict resolution is also addressed, with the aim of helping our students to develop the skills and strategies to manage and resolve conflict in a sensible, fair, and effective manner, and not to see conflict as something to avoid or eliminate. The key features outlined in this part of the curriculum relating to values education are at the Key Stage 1, which typically deals with students between the age of 5 and 7. Students should be given the opportunity to play constructively together and develop friendships with peers, to manage their impulses by developing habits and routines that help them to be cooperative class members, identify and develop with suitable support the skills required to work together in a group, including taking turns, sharing, and caring for their environment and resources. Form positive relationships and explain why these skills are desirable. Begin to understand how their actions affect others. Learn that some people have special needs and to respect the rights, feelings, and efforts of others. This foundation is continued to be built upon when we move to Key Stage 2, which is typically dealing with students between the ages of 8 to 10. Students should be given the opportunity to recognize their worth as individuals by identifying positive things about themselves and their achievements, seeing their mistakes, making amends, and setting personal goals. Face new challenges positively by collecting information, looking for help, making responsible choices, and taking action. Students at this age should learn to recognize the risks in different situations and then decide how to behave responsibly, including sensible road use and judging what kind of physical contact is acceptable or unacceptable. They need to recognize that pressure to behave in an unacceptable or risky way can come from a variety of sources, including people that they know, and how to ask for help and use basic techniques for resisting pressure to do wrong. At Key Stage 3, which typically deals with students between the ages of 11 to 14, students should be given the opportunity to respect differences between people as they develop their own sense of identity. They must be able to recognize how others see them and be able to give and receive constructive feedback and praise. They should be able to recognize the emotions associated with loss and change caused by death, divorce, separation, and new family members. They must be able to recognize and manage risk and make safer choices about healthy lifestyles, different environments, and travel. And they must also recognize when pressure from others threatens their personal safety and well-being, and to develop effective ways of resisting pressures, including knowing when and where to get help. The National Curriculum for Religious Education, as it relates directly to value education and teaching our young people morals. The aims of the religious education, as outlined in the curriculum, are to develop knowledge and understanding of Christianity and other world religions, recognize religion as an important expression of human experiences, investigate and understand the questions and answers that religions can offer about the nature and meaning of life, to develop their own beliefs, attitudes, moral values, and practices through a process of personal search, discovery, and critical evaluation. As explained in the curriculum, religious education makes an important contribution to the person's personal, spiritual, and social development, and it deals with the growth of individuals as it relates to their self-awareness and relationships with others in conjunction with their sphere of beliefs, values, and practices. Teaching religious studies is an important part of teaching our students values, morals, and ethics, and this is carried out in every government school. It is also important that a part of teaching our students values and beliefs in our community, because Cayman is predominantly a Christian country, and Christian beliefs and values are an integral part of our social development and our Constitution. Another goal in our education system is to have all of our primary schools be authorized as International Baccalaureate Primary Years Program, which is for ages 3 to 12. The International Baccalaureate Primary Years Program is currently 3 schools on island are authorized. We have the Sir John Acumba Primary School in West Bay, Savannah Primary, and Prospect Primary, and a number of other schools are working in train to achieve the official recognition by the IB as an IB World School. For those of you that may not know, the International Baccalaureate Program is a value-based program as outlined on their website. And it specifically seeks to address students' academic, social, emotional well-being. It encourages students to develop independence and to take responsibility for their own learning. It supports students' effort to gain an understanding of the world and to function comfortably within it. And it helps students establish personal values as a foundation upon which international mindedness will develop and flourish. Also, the IB Learner Profile aims to develop internationally minded people who, recognizing their common humanity and shared guardianship of the planet, help to create a better and more peaceful world. The profile represents 10 attributes valued by the IB World School system that throughout the IB program, all students should develop. It states that IB learners should strive to be inquirers, knowledgeable, thinkers, communicators, principled, open-minded, caring, risk-takers, balanced, and reflective. These attributes all lead to students developing values and morals, and having our primary schools IB authorized helps to ensure that values education is an integral part of the delivery of education in our schools, and that our students develop a clear understanding of their morals and values and that of the world around them so that they may become global citizens. From a historical perspective, it's important to recognize that coming out of a national education conference in 2005, there was a strong consensus regarding the issues affecting learners and the needs of society. Arguably, most of those, if not all, of those needs and issues identified are still relevant and applicable to today in 2014. The outcomes of the conference led to the development of the guiding set of principles formulated to shape the direction of educational reform and to address these issues. These principles, which are summarized in the Profile of the Educated Caymanian, guided the formation of the national curriculum in 2008. The Ministry of Education has adopted the definition of curriculum given by A.V. Kelly as all the learning which is planned and guided by the school, whether it is carried on in groups or individually, inside or outside of the school. We aspire our students to be enthusiastic about learning and continue to extend their knowledge and skills after they leave school, to be literate, numerate, and adept at ICT, to be good communicator. We aspire for them to be creative and appreciative of the arts, to have a positive outlook and high self-esteem, to be well-rounded, good at finding solutions to problems, flexible and adaptable to changing circumstances and demands. Have a strong work ethic and willingness to become an honest, reliable, and responsible member of the workforce. We aspire for them to be respectful to God, to him or herself, others, people from different backgrounds, and the environment and property. We aspire for them to be proud of and knowledgeable about Caymanian culture, whilst respectful of other cultures and beliefs. We aspire for them to be good team players, civic-minded and willing to serve. And we aspire for them to have an awareness of global issues affecting aspects of life in the 21st century. And although these qualities are referred to in the context of the Profile of the Educated Caymanian, this and these value principles are equally applicable to all students of all nationalities who are taught in the Cayman Islands. So the aims of the national curriculum are to provide, in partnership with the stakeholders, a broad, relevant, balanced, and integrated learning framework that promotes physical, emotional, intellectual, social, spiritual, cultural, creative, and moral development, and to enable students to become critical thinkers, problem solvers, lifelong learners, and productive citizens in an ever-changing global society. The behavioral goals enshrined in the national curriculum and the aspirational outcomes are that by the time our children leave school, students should be well-rounded, efficient problem solvers, flexible and adaptable to changing circumstances and demands, be able to reflect on their own learning and experiences, and to assess and understand their own strengths and limitations, be able to demonstrate a commitment to peace, social justice, tolerance, and the protection of the environment, and imply a global perspective in their attitudes and behavior. And we aspire for them to be able to know and to act with integrity and honesty, with strong sense of fairness, justice, and respect for the dignity of the individual groups and communities. Having outlined the various ways in which the values education permeates the education system of the Cayman Islands, it is perhaps worth considering, in view of the theme of this conference, its place in combating corruption. Values education is a vital component of any anti-corruption strategy. It has been suggested that informed citizens are probably more effective in preventing corrupt and unethical practices and behavior of public servants than the most sophisticated codes of conduct, laws, and regulations. Anti-corruption laws and institutions need people who do not tolerate corruption and who actively act against it. Without reports of corruption, corrupt acts cannot be penalized. Ombudsmen cannot follow up on complaints, and the judiciary cannot prosecute. In relation to anti-corruption efforts, values education promotes the values, attitudes, and expectations that tackle corruption and the skills to resist it. Values education develops people's understanding of their rights and responsibility for preserving the public good and can be seen as having an impact on two levels. First, it's aimed at strengthening individuals in their ethical decision-making. Value, conflicts, and ethical dilemmas frequently arise in our daily lives and the daily lives of students. For example, when individual family values clash with that of the moral and ethical stance of the school, values education can provide the skill to identify such conflicts and to instill the motivation for solving them in the best interest of all concerned. Second, values education aims at building a culture of zero tolerance for corruption through strengthening the student voice, public awareness, and participation in the democratic process, such as through student councils, through national youth forums, through youth parliament, and other opportunities for young people to have an active role and voice. In doing so, it acts in preparing the present generation of students to take a stance against corruption. So the relevance of educating future citizens in the values of integrity, citizenship, transparency, and the prevention of corruption have recently been demonstrated through the results of a diagnostic research study conducted by the Inter-American Development Bank. The study focused on 30,000 students in the 8th grade through 6 Latin American countries: Chile, Colombia, Dominican Republic, Guatemala, Mexico, and Paraguay, and showed that students with more civic education are less tolerant of corrupt practices and less likely to violate the law. Findings such as these encourage us to undertake research into developing materials and tools and teaching strategies that support the teaching of values of integrity, transparency, and legality within a framework that is designed to build resilience against corruption among our future citizens. As you can see, the Cayman Islands government education system sees the teaching of values, morals, and ethics to our students as a vital part of their learning experience. And in partnership with parents and the wider community, we view it as a responsibility of all of our schools. However, we cannot be complacent and satisfied that the measures that we've put in place thus far to support values education in our schools are sufficient to meet the ever-changing needs and demands of our present and future generation of students. Whilst we recognize the extent and depth of the work already undertaken to promote values education within our education system, we must also seek to sustain and build upon this platform. We must continue to critically analyze and evaluate the effectiveness of teaching instruction and the delivery of values education enshrined in our various national policies and national curriculum. Are we communicating the message, and are we reaching our young people in a manner which is effective to prevent or combat corruption and corrupt practices today and in the future? We must ensure that we involve young people directly when trying to determine the answer to that question. At this point, I'd like to make it clear that the teaching of values and morals to our young people should not be and is not the sole responsibility of the education system. And I would emphasize the fact that values and morals should first be taught at home and are in fact learned at home, either through direct or indirect teaching, based on observation and experiences of our children in their home and community setting. Then, in line with international best practice, when students attend schools, the values and morals learned at home should be reinforced and further developed within the school environment. Parents and or guardians should not rely on the child's school to be the first to introduce values and morals for the first time. It is our responsibility as parents to be our children's first teachers and to give them the basic tools to help them to prepare for school and the wider world around them. Parents must own this responsibility and carry it out before and during their children's education journey. Within our ongoing education reform process, we have an opportunity to raise the profile of values education. We have an opportunity to make it even more explicit, highlighting and outlining our aims in this area, and to take active steps to operationalize, build capacity, and interest in ensuring that the education system plays its full part in developing values-driven and ethically motivated students. Teaching positive and ethical values must become the way of life, in the classroom, on the sports field, during the artistic, social, and other community endeavors. In relation to the present generation, the Cayman Islands Generation Z, the delivery of values education should be experiential. It must be accessible and it must be engaging. And it must be responsive to the ever-changing reality in which they grow and learn. To be effective, the lessons to be learned must be as familiar as a click of a mouse. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Honourable Minister, for your thorough coverage of the topic. And I won't say anything more, but I will introduce the Honourable Andrew Holness, who is going to be the discussant. Honourable Andrew Holness is the youngest person in Jamaica's history to become Prime Minister of Jamaica and was the 9th Prime Minister overall. He's a graduate of the University of the West Indies with a bachelor's degree in Management Studies and a master's degree in Development Studies. Honorable Mr. Holness has been a member of Parliament since 1997 and served as Minister of Education of Jamaica from 2007 to 2012. The education portfolio is very dear to him, and he chose to retain it while he was Prime Minister. Who better then to be the discussant in the area of teaching values to the present generation? Please help me welcome Honorable Mr. Holness.
Thank you very much, Professor. Thank you, Honorable Minister, for a very comprehensive presentation. Thank you, audience, for staying and listening so intently. My job is not to give a speech, but I can't help myself, and I'm sure you will forgive me. I am part of Generation X. I haven't reached Generation Z as yet, so we're part of Generation X. And this is actually very well defined. Studies have been done to characterize from pre-boomers to baby boomers to Generation X. And now they have Generation Z, which is the net generation, the generation of the information age. And in your presentation, you pointed out very clearly that the significant challenge of Generation Z, the net generation, is how to manage information. Because education in the information age, as you've rightfully said, has moved from content. Content is no longer the issue. Content is available. But you've pointed out that it is now a matter of process. I want you to consider, however, that it is also a matter of context. That with so much information available, we will, through research in education, develop the correct processes to deliver the content using technology. But with so much information, you must place it in context. Because with so much information, it destroys the traditional structures, relationships, and value systems that normally order society. With so much information, as you have said, young people are far more brighter than they were in the Generation X, in the baby boomers and the pre-boomers, because they have access to so much information. But the question is, what will they do with it? And I want you to consider that. What of the structure of authority? If authority was previously based on access to information, and now everybody has information, then how are authority structures currently defined? Does experience continue to play a part in determining the social authority structures? These are some questions that would be important to ask ourselves when we consider how do we teach values in education today for the net generation. I would want you to also consider what was said in the presentation, that the 3 R's are relevant. The 3 R's are relevant, and the first R is relevance, rigor, and relationships. But I want you to consider 8 characteristics of the net generation, which would be important for educators in trying to develop strategies and systems to teach ethics in education. With the expansion and the access to knowledge, the net generation, Generation Z, believes heavily in freedom. And this is not necessarily freedom of other people, but freedom of themselves. That they should be able to do what they want to do. And this is very evident in what is happening right across the world, where the internet is now becoming the tool of influencing political developments, the Arab Spring being one good example of that, the ideal of freedom as part of teaching ethics, that this Generation Z values highly freedom. They value customization. They want their things to be different. They can make things suit them, fit them. That leads to a problem in education, because most of our education systems don't teach according to how students learn. They teach according to how the teacher is trained. And so we're going to have to now retrofit our education system so that our teachers can customize their lessons according to how students learn or would want to learn. That's something that we should consider in ethics education. The information age has also thrown up this characteristic in the next generation. They scrutinize everything, which means that they are very critical, which means that they do research, not in the sense of homework, but if you say something to them, they will go on Google and say, no, that's not how it goes. You have to pay attention to that, because if you are trying to teach values and they can get access to other value systems, they may not necessarily accept what you say. Then, of course, they like to collaborate. It's almost the hallmark of the next generation. They will be on their iPads and their phones. They will be using WhatsApp and Facebook, and they will be exchanging ideas. They will be collaborating. That could be an advantage in how we teach. It could be an advantage, but as well, with that speedy exchange of information, values may not necessarily always stick. And then they like speed. They don't believe that things should take as long as they did generations before. And that, of course, will affect value systems, especially conservative value systems, that believe that you should go through the system and experience it and work for what you have. That those might really undermine conservative traditional value systems. Then they like to innovate. In other words, they don't believe that things should stay the same way. Conservative systems are going to be challenged. And indeed, innovation is a critical part of the information age. So value systems will be changing far more rapidly than Generation X or baby boomers would be used to. They like entertainment, so not everything has to be serious. Formal systems will become less and less important in social relationships because they like entertainment. But you know what is surprising about the Generation Z, the next generation, is that they naturally like systems of integrity. And that's very important in dealing with setting up anti-corruption frameworks, because the current generation likes to know that things that are presented to them are truthful. And in that, to me, is the asset that education systems ought to take advantage of to deliver relevant, rigorous, and relation-building curriculum in ethical education. In fact, the 8 characteristics that I have mentioned for purpose of integrity was done by a company called N Generation, a consulting company. These are not my ideas. I like the fact that you try to tease out that there are inherent conflicts in trying to deliver any curriculum in education and ethics. Because, and especially for Cayman, you are a diverse country. And so the important principle value, I think that must underlie any curriculum in education that seeks to deal with values and ethics in education, would have to be tolerance. Tolerance. And that is something that is not always in our societies. It's not always easy to promote, but we must continue to persevere in that direction. You mentioned something that values education begins at home, and that's so important because the first teacher is the parent. I would want you to probably say some more on what Cayman is doing in promoting the parent as the moral teacher. What are we doing about parenting education? Because that is going to be ultimately important. The principle of parallel reinforcement. What is being taught in the school must be reinforced in the home. In Jamaica, I've had that problem where the values that we were trying to pass on in the schools were not always values supported at the home. And so what we did was to establish the National Parenting Commission, which was designed to bring parents in on education, to explain to them why certain values are important, relevant, and to get them to support the education system. The important thing in all of this is, how do we get this generation to be citizens active against corruption? With information, corruption, of course, is easily exposed. But it doesn't mean that anything will be done about it. And indeed, people with information could even rationalize why it is necessary. And we have seen cases like that. So it all comes down, as it always does, to leadership. What is leadership going to do? And how do we get our citizens, each and every one of them, to be ethical leaders in their spheres of activities? Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for listening.
Thank you very much, Minister Holness. We have time, we don't have time, but I'm going to allow time for three questions. Is there a mic on the floor? No, yes, one is coming. We have a question right here and one beside him, so that's fine. So we have 1, 2, and then 3. And
I listened very intently, and I think that the plan is admirable. But having led the Social Services Department for 17.5 years, and now in my retirement, having returned to the corps to be a guardian, I feel that the education plan can only work if you have a look again at the National Assessment of Living Conditions and also the WINT study of the family. Because I'm still seeing parents who are abdicating their responsibilities for the most part, many fathers who are not involved, and also our own government in breach in several parts of the Constitution when it comes to looking after our children, and in particular, putting programs and facilities in place to look after troubled children and also children who require various things to be done with them. You know, we can do all these good things at school, but as the Honorable Leader of the Opposition just said, they can be eroded at home as well. So I'm hoping that this time around, you will look at all the ministries because this work calls for a great deal of interministerial collaboration. No one ministry can really address these issues. Thank you very much.
Okay, yes, sir.
Yes, I work for the civil service in the Cayman Islands, and my point is, I believe that there is some confusion between two concepts. One is education in itself, the other one is instruction. I believe that the problem that we're facing now, because this new generation have direct access to information, to the internet and so on, that they're not very receptive to the model that provides basically instruction. This is something that is probably back from the Industrial Revolution, in which you need to produce individuals that are basically modular, factory type of. Education, on the other hand, is coming from the Latin word educare. It is to bring out, is not to feed. It is to bring out from the individual. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much for your comments, sir. The last question was from, yes, thank you.
Thank you. This question is for Minister Holness. And I'd
Could
just
you-
like to commend the Education Minister for what I think is really an outstanding and forward-thinking presentation. So my question to my opposition, whatever the term is do we have a similar document in Jamaica? Something that compares to what Minister Rivers just presented. And I'm putting you on the spot with this one. How do you think that the present education ministry is doing in terms of executing its responsibility to the education system?
I think that's an unfair question. Yes, there are several documents, very extensive. 10 years ago, Jamaica undertook the transformation of the education system, which was a bipartisan effort, which continues today. The present minister makes a point of saying he's continuing what I started. And I will guarantee that I will say when I take it over again, that I will continue what I started. But yes, so we do invest heavily in strategic direction in the Ministry of Education, and it continues. In terms of the state of education in Jamaica now, today is the GSAT examination, which for our friends in Cayman, that is the gateway examination from primary school to high school. Unfortunately, we still have to ration the preferred places by using an achievement test. The test is effectively a merit-based system, so in one sense it is fair. It allows the high performers to get first choice on the best high school places. But in another sense, it defeats the purpose of education, which is to give universal access and to ensure that every Jamaican can get the best education. So I am committed to removing GSAT. In fact, the first strategy was to make the GSAT examination fail as a placement examination. And how did I achieve that? Because it is failing now as a placement examination. We focused on literacy. Poor children were the ones who are 90% likely not to be universally literate. And so we invested heavily in a national education plan that was started by the previous administration. I continued it, expanded it, and used management strategies to ensure that the system was accountable and that it was effective. So we developed a measurement system where we had a national literacy test where the students had to sit that 4 times, which really refocused the resources of the school away from GSAT and to ensuring literacy. And with all our students now leaving primary school, I would say they would be in about 70% literacy, when before they were at about 50%, and if it continues, they will attain universal literacy. If that happens and every student is doing well, then they will all be doing well at GSAT, and the competitive nature of GSAT would fail. In other words, if all the students are getting in their 90s, then it is unfair to say because you got 91.5, then the student who got 91.25 shouldn't get into a good school. And so the idea is to let all our students do well, but in doing that, putting students who are doing well into high schools who are not doing so well may very well improve those high schools as well. So it was a two-pronged strategy. The third strategy was to improve accountability, improve the teaching and learning effectiveness, and improve the leadership management of schools to ensure that they all lift their standards. So that process is ongoing, and I won't detract from what is happening now. I don't think it is happening as fast as it should, and I certainly think I would have moved it faster. I mean, but the process continues, and we do support the program of transforming education in Jamaica.
Thank you. Friends, we could really talk about this for a long time, but we must stop now. I ask you to join me in thanking both our speakers for this session very heartily. And thank you for your attention.